think maybe this is the good segue. We're kind of at the halfway point.
Okay.
And if I had to define,
bring us back home, man. We've kind of been meandering.
If I had to kind of give an overview of this part one, it's you said it, Coach. It's about culture. We talked about recruiting. We talked about relationship building as a parent, as a coach, what the coaches were like, how they interacted. And I think all that leads up to, I called it little things and basics, but the reality is it's culture. You're right. All these little things add up, and it is a big thing. It creates the culture. So that's part one of this.
All right.
Now, if you came to this show and you're like, well, when are they going to start talking about the players and the practice and what they do? That's what we're going into now.
That sounds good.
That's what we can talk about.
Right.
That's part two of this now. And this maybe this is the basics. This is the fundamentals. This is the things that if we're going to be good,
the Jimmies and the Joes,
all the mistakes that led to little one score losses over the last few years, you get them fixed in practice. And Coach has talked about how practice is the most important time. I'm sure you have your own thoughts on that as a coach too, about how important this is. So let's just start with that part first. On Saturday morning, they went for about 45 minutes of practice before they went to the scrimmage. So what did you see, Coach? What were some of the things that caught your eye in those first 45 minutes before we got to the actual scrimmage?
Yeah, I've been to 2 practices so far. So the first practice I was at was the third practice of spring. It was the first one with pads. And so that what they did there and what they did for, it was more like an hour probably at least before they went to the scrimmage. Those were very, very similar. Big emphasis on special teams for the first half hour probably. And, I think they've always talked about that, but this one, it felt different. It wasn't just 1 or 2 drills that everybody was going through. It was, it was every coach controlling or coaching a certain technique or a certain skill of a certain special team.
Okay.
And for example, you had some kickoff returners and wedge guys over here, and you got some front line guys over there, and inside maybe you're working on some extra point PAT or whatever. But there was different things going on at every different station, and it really felt to me like they got a ton of good special teams work.
Okay.
And this is one thing I will say, I really, we both said it a lot. I don't want to ever say anything bad about the previous staff because I do think they did a great job. But I think from what I've seen so far with their special teams emphasis, it seems to be more. And it seems to be like they're getting more focused special teams work done. Okay. They've obviously got a good kicker and punter and multiple guys there. So that was one thing that definitely stood out. The next is just the total numbers. And obviously spring, you're always going to have fewer guys because all the freshmen aren't in yet. But the fewer numbers that were out there, you were able to get – there was very little standing around.
Could you feel the fewer numbers? Did it seem smaller? Did it seem like a smaller roster?
Yes, it did.
It did.
You could definitely tell. And it's always a little like that in the spring because all the freshmen aren't in yet and the seniors are gone.
Sure.
But this was – because I've been to spring ball for 25 straight years. I went to 1 or 2 in the fall and 1 or 2 in the spring. So I've been going to these practices forever. And this felt like, other than maybe Callahan years, this felt like a very small team. And maybe I was just comparing it to the last 5
gotcha.
Where it was just sure. And it really felt like every kid was able to get more work whether they were splitting up doing stations or when they were scrimmaging. 1s versus 1s here, 2s versus 2s here, 3s versus 3s there. There weren't really 5s anywhere. They just weren't there because there weren't enough guys. So when they were doing 7-on-7, inside run, whatever, everybody was going. Each one of those groups maybe had 1 or 2 subs that would rotate in. But there was never a time, and there was time in the last several years where you would have guys that would kind of stand there and for a lot of practice. And they were still getting multiple groups going. There were just so many guys. Right. It was just almost impossible to get them all rolling. So that was another big thing. And you've all heard about the quarterbacks were live in the scrimmage. The scrimmage was awesome. I mean, it was very physical. And we were talking about the green jerseys on the quarterbacks, and we're like, gee, when did we start, making these wimp quarterbacks that got to wear green? And then all of a sudden it was live and they were taking them down hard.
Really?
Yeah, it was
fully to the ground.
Full to the ground with the QBs. Yeah, it was And I haven't seen that since Frank Solich. So.
Were they wearing green jerseys, or were they actually? So they were wearing green jerseys, but it was
target.
But it was
yeah, and they were doing different tempos. So at the beginning they were doing some thud, but it wasn't much. It was far more full than it was thud. So yeah, it was full tilt to the ground for most of the scrimmage.
I just asked this. I had Adam Carricker on yesterday, and I brought this up to him because in 2005 he was on the team, and I've mentioned this countless times on the show. So Redcasters, you've heard this before, but
here we go.
Were you at it, or do you remember the scrimmage where Joe Daly came into the scrimmage as a starting quarterback, and Zach Taylor ended the 2-hour 200 play scrimmage as the starter?
Was that the coaches clinic scrimmage?
It was the coaches clinic weekend.
I'm sure I was there. Yeah, I think I remember what you're talking about. I've been to every clinic for 25 years.
Yeah,
so
it was for me.
They beat the hell out of him for most of that scrimmage. They beat the hell out of Zach, but he just kept getting up and making first downs. I
catch so much grief for this because I've been saying the green jersey thing since the start of the Redcast for the last 6 years. But that weekend, that scrimmage was so formative in my mind as a coach, and you can't learn real football things about players if you don't go out and do some football at some point. You've got to play. And I always said Joe Daly, no disrespect to him. My goodness, that guy's, he's coaching in the pros, and the dude has forgotten more football than I'll never know, right? But he looked like the perfect quarterback in every drill. I feel like every time. But once you throw a little bit of the live bullets against him, and that's where Zach Taylor started to rise out of it. And that's something Carricker talked about yesterday, was how tough Taylor was. And they learned that in that scrimmage. And you really can't learn it unless you tackle the guy and you take him to the ground. He has to get up and he has to run a huddle and he has to run the next play and do real football. And so anyways, I want to go back to Saturday. Now, this Saturday, with that kind of in my mind, did you see anything out of the quarterbacks? Were there any, did you see some tales where, oh man, that guy did something really good. He got up, he took a big hit, or anything impress you that way?
Well, every year at these early practices, so that would have been, I think, the 7th practice, I think. Mm-hmm. The offense usually stinks. It just, the defense is always ahead.
Right.
Excuse me. But I was very pleasantly surprised. The offense looked pretty good. Running the ball and throwing the ball. And I'll tell you what, Sims looks good. He looks good. He looks the part. And then, the first practice I saw, it was hard to tell because it was, there were a lot of drill work, 7-on-7. You got, don't worry about any rush. A 7-on-7 quarterback is a 7-on-7 quarterback. But on that scrimmage, he ran it. He threw it. He looked good. I thought Harburg looked good. And it was obvious that they were trying to give Harburg some, let him run it a little bit. He just looked big and strong and athletic. Standing by Heinrich Harburg. And I have no clue if he'll ever play a snap. I don't know. But he looked big and athletic, and he ran the ball very well in the scrimmage. Mm-hmm. So, I thought those two guys looked very, very good. Mm-hmm. The receivers, I can't think of his name, the new receiver from Virginia.
Billy Kemp?
Yes. He did a lot of good things. He caught the ball. He even ran the ball a couple times. I think he'll be an impact player. Obviously, he was where he was at. So, there was – the offensive line, I think, is going to be pretty decent. Getting Murray back was a big thing. Yeah, you got quite a bit of experience in there. Prohaska coming back.
If we can keep him healthy.
Yeah, you think you feel like we're not returning a ton of offensive linemen, but then Nuri's going to be a big one. He's important, and I think Prohaska's got a chance to be phenomenal. So I think you got some good offensive linemen.
And Turner, and Corcoran and Benhart, they got a ton of experience, and they were pretty big time recruits when we got them. And Honke, I know you've said this a million times, and I tend to agree with you. They were big recruits when we got them. If they're getting developed and the offense is a little more structured and a little more targeted to what they want to do and build on strengths, there's no reason to think these guys couldn't make a big jump. If I offered you a 6 foot, what is he, 6'10"?
Oh, 6'10" for Oscar, 6'9" Benhart.
Say Benhart. Say if I offered you a 6'9" offensive tackle who has tons of starting experience in the Big Ten and put him in the transfer portal, don't you think you'd want that guy?
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm saying? We have that guy, so it's like I don't know. We could see how he can develop too, but I mean, I'm very interested in the offensive line this year, and I'm not in the camp of thinking that we didn't do enough to address it necessarily. I'm not. I think we haven't. I think the way we address the offensive line is coaching up the guys that we have personally.
And there were a lot of new faces that I'd never seen before, and I didn't know who they were. You know, a lot of transfers, big dudes. Now, overall, there weren't a ton of offensive linemen,
right?
But there were a fair amount of brand new guys that I've never seen before,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of them were playing with the ones. So, you know, I can't even comment on who the heck they were, but they were big and they were different guys. So I think there's going to be some new guys coming in playing those positions too.
You know,
could be.
Ben Scott's the transfer from Arizona State, the center. Now he was out on Saturday.
Yes,
they said he was back in practice today.
He's
so,
probably going to start.
Yeah, he's back in practice today. Did you notice who was playing center and how were the snaps and everything? I mean, did you see any signs of concern there?
No, he was a guy that I didn't know. I didn't recognize him, so I couldn't tell you who it was. And we were talking about him. Me and my coaching staff were talking about him specifically. He was doing a good job, and the snaps were beautiful, but I have no idea who he was. So, yeah, I don't know. And I'll tell you what, the defense looks so much different. It looks
different.
It's not even the same. It's just that schematically, personnel. It's just it's just as a whole different world. It's going to be a lot more movement, a lot more, just kind of letting them fly a little bit more.
Interesting.
I think you're going to see a lot more blitz, a lot more, just a lot of. It's going to be the whole structure of the whole thing is just not going to look like anything that we've ever had in Lincoln.
Interesting.
Least, and I think Shenander's stuff was very, very good, but it was a lot of just classic defense. Whether it was the 3-4 that we started with or the 4-man front from the last couple of years. This one, it's and you got a little bit of a taste of those 3-3s, in the bowl games. It's not the same as TCU's 3-3-5, but something like that. And I watched Syracuse play in the bowl game just so I could kind of get a look, and it does look similar to what Syracuse had. But like they said, they're going to morph it to the dudes we have.
Yeah.
And so, we had a lot of guys that weren't suited up or injured. Reimer didn't play a whole lot, and you still got Henrich out, and so who knows what exactly it's going to look like. They could have 4 guys with their hand in the ground, maybe. So, but it definitely looked a lot different.
That's what I was, wondering at points too, is that, how much flexibility is there between some of this is your personnel. I'd made the statement before that you can make the argument you need less defensive linemen in a 4-man front versus a 3-man front, because the 3-man front, they all need to be 270, 280 guys. In a 4-man front, you need the 2 big dudes in the middle, and then your outside guys can be some of those edge guys. And we have plenty of those edge guys, whether it's Gunnarsson or Chief Borders or, Jamari Butler, those guys that are more in the 240 range. So, there could be times where I think size-wise and depth-wise, they may have more of the bodies to do more 4-man front if that's what they choose to do.
Well, and that is, in my opinion, the position group that was the lightest of any was the defensive line. I mean, I would have to, I mean, the guys we had a lot of good ones out there. Ty Robinson didn't even suit up, so I didn't see him. But we were definitely light, and I'm not saying light physically, just few bodies. There just weren't a ton of defensive linemen out there. So I think that's probably something that who knows if they're going to go shopping in the portal or what they're going to do, but I think we got to improve that a little bit. And I think you're going to maybe see a few more, you're going to have more positions probably for those 215 to 20 pound hybrid type linebackers, a little bit more guys like the Taggy and the, guys like that can get out there and run a little bit more in this defense, just because it relies so much on blitzing and moving around and things like that. So, previous years, you could have a couple giant guys up front and, some of those old school typical middle linebackers that could make reads and, you kind of start stationary, make a read and then get to the ball. I think we're going to be dictating a little bit more going forward where we're just blitzing, and so I think you can maybe get a little bit more speed out on the field that way. And to me, Reimer is built perfect for this defense. I mean, because he's a dude that can get out and run and go. I mean, he's they didn't know if he was going to be a safety or a linebacker when he first got here, so I think this defense is built perfect for Reimer. So you might see him have a big season. He has to love how this thing's set up.
Are they rotating a lot? I mean, it's probably a little limited in spring, but it sounds like one of the things Rhule really wants to do is make sure there's a heavy rotation in that defense.
Yeah. When they sent out the ones, there was multiple different guys going out there with the ones. So it appeared. And you know what? It's a brand new staff. They're still trying to fill out personnel. They're trying to figure out, I'm sure they have no idea. And you know what? Everybody who's still on the team's got a shot right now.
Yeah.
And so they just had a lot of guys. It wasn't like there was just 11 that went out with the ones. It was a lot of different. And they would go, so the scrimmage went 1s on 1s, 2s on 2s, 3s on 3s, and then back. And then they'd put them in situations. There's 2 minutes to go. The offense is down by 2 points, 1 timeout, whatever. And then they did it some goal line. And then they did some inside the inside the 20 red zone. So they put them in all types of different situations. And then they, like I said, they did each situation with 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, and 3 versus 3.
Okay.
Now I know our listeners will want to hear this. When they got into goal line, please tell me we got into shotgun, right? Is that what we did at the one? Or I mean,
no, there was definitely an I formation sighting there. So
well, that actually leads me. I was going to switch back to the offense.
Yeah, I want to touch back on with the running backs eventually. So yeah,
sure. Back. Well, there's 2 positions I think that Coach Osborne used to always use so well, and really was a differentiator for us. It was fullbacks, it was tight ends. Every team has some running backs, every team has some fast receivers, but those 2 positions set us apart. And right now, when we look at what we have right now on this team, tight end has gotten a lot of talk. Yeah. There's a lot of size and some real talent there.
Sure.
It's young and it's been inexperienced.
A lot of promise.
So a lot of promise. And then the fullback is the other spot too. Is what are we seeing out of that? So I guess in those 2 areas, there are personnel groupings and all that, 12 and 22 and all that. What kind of personnel groupings and what did you see from those positions?
Well, I mean, I think you're going to probably see mostly a spread offense, but they did have some I formation. They put in situations, they put a fullback out there. I don't know that, these guys haven't really been able to recruit yet like they want to. So I don't know that we have the big old burly typical Nebraska fullbacks out there even yet. But, they took a kid, Kluver, I think is his name, Clover, who was a defensive lineman, I think, and they bumped him over to fullback. So they're trying to find those body types right now to get those fullbacks out there. There's new tight. I mentioned there was new linemen that I didn't know. There's new tight ends that I don't know. There was a kid number 99. I should have a roster on me, but I don't. Who a big tight end, not necessarily tall, but big. I mean, looks almost like a small offensive lineman, but he caught some passes and he's obviously nimble with good hands. I think Fedone, if we got to do everything we can to keep that kid healthy because he's pretty special. And, he's 3rd year in the program now and he's big. I mean,
does he look noticeably bigger?
He looks big. He looks the part for sure. So I really hope we get to see him out there on Saturdays because I think he could be a big-time player. I really do. He's got the look of as good as – I don't know. I hate to hype him up too much. He's never been out on the field. But from what I've seen, I think he can be darn good.
He's just
and then they got the kid from Creighton Prep.
Rollins?
Yeah, Rollins playing tight end, and he looks big. And, whether he's – a part of things once the season gets going. I don't know, but
I thought they were talking about moving him to the end.
He was one of the gray shirts in a practice where he was playing both offense and defense. So you're saying on Saturday, at least they had him playing offense there.
Well, I saw him playing offense. Yeah.
Playing tight end.
Okay.
And he looks the part too. I mean, he's a big, strong dude.
He's run. You have Gilbert, the transfer from Georgia, and he was, a big time.
I never noticed him. I don't know if he was hurt.
Okay.
I don't know. I did not. Yeah, I forgot about him, and I did not notice him. I don't know. I noticed, like I said, Fedone, and then this other kid. So yeah, I forgot all about that guy. I don't know.
Now you mentioned Kluver being moved over to fullback. I have to admit, this would have been back in January, and we were prognosticating on the Redcast, but there's a certain kid wearing number 41 I
Yeah.
threw out as a name.
Clearly,
I was
that's
like,
a fullback number all day.
I mean, you know him better than it. Can you squelch those Redcast rumors? Is that not happening? Or could
Well,
you
no,
see him
he's
be someone that could be-
linebacker. I mean, he was out there with the top groups. He kid's never been hurt, and he popped his hip flexor. It's probably not.
Geez.
I'm hoping he'll be fine for the last week or so and be able to play in the spring game. But no, he's playing linebacker. He's like all the other kids. It's new staff and hoping to get a shot out there. But yeah, he was playing with some of the upper groups during the scrimmage, and but he was recruited hard by Kansas State, Iowa State. They wanted him real bad for like a fullback.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought there was in his recruitment he was kind of a not a tweener. What do you call? But there was a he was being recruited
like an off the line tight end, like a wing type of tight end.
What's his eligibility?
He's got 2 years left.
He's got 2 years left. Okay.
And he might even, I don't know if he's going to take it or not, but he could even potentially get a medical hardship for last year if he wanted to. He hasn't applied for anything yet, but no, he's got 2 years left for sure, though.
Okay.
This is fifth, and then the COVID year after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a weird experience for him. Like, what a weird time to go to college. Just strange.
It has been crazy. I mean, like I said, those guys have been through the ringer, and they've been through so many crazy things with COVID and that whole stupid lawsuit with that ridiculous junk.
Crazy.
And, they've been through a lot. So
typical.
How has I guess again, this could put your parent hat back on for a second. How has the transition been for him? Like, we've heard some players, for some players, this is going to be brand new and they're going to like it, they're not going to like it. Or maybe there's somebody who is just looking for that another chance, a new set of eyes on him. Yeah. For someone like Garrett, I mean, has this been a fresh set of eyes on him, giving him a new chance? I mean, how has he kind of viewed the changes?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And, last year was a great opportunity for him, but he was going with the ones. He was rotating with Reimer, and Reimer and Henrich were the starters, but Garrett was rotating with those guys all through the spring, or not the spring, the preseason, the fall camp with the starters. And 2 days before they left for Ireland, he had a lineman fall on his foot and he tore his plantar fascia, and it cost him 8 weeks. So, and that was a frustrating thing because there were some injuries in there, and he would have been right in the middle of everything. And you come back 8 weeks later and they got a new defensive coordinator and everything's different. And he went from maybe even starting a few of those games with those injuries they had to, not really playing much at all. So that last year was personally for him was very frustrating, I would say. And so, that was, if he would have stayed healthy, he would have been in the middle of things last year. This year, I mean, I think everybody, it's a fresh start for everybody. Yeah. I mean, it's, they know that Luke Reimer's a stud. They know that he's a starter and he's a man. There's certain guys that, but even so, I mean, every coach, they're going to give everybody a chance, and they're going to evaluate. And that's like I said in the scrimmage, even though they said ones, there was a lot of different guys going in with those groups. Yeah, just because they're trying to get eyes on every kid, they're trying to evaluate them. Because the spring, you're trying to teach the offenses and defense to those kids, but it's also those coaches, new coaches, evaluating them. Because you can watch film all you want, but once you see them live in person, that's where you can really evaluate them. So, I mean,
it's probably the truest evaluation they ever get as a team.
What's that?
It's probably the truest evaluation you can ever get of a team, because you don't have any recruiting bias or anything like that. You just show up. It's all like, hey, who can play for me? It's got to be invigorating for your sons, just to kind of be like, all right, clean slate, no history. Everybody's starting from scratch. We're all learning a new defense, and and I think that's probably true for a lot of guys for a lot of positions. And that's exactly what this team needs. I think a lot of these guys to get these, there's, I guess my point is there's talent on this team. And it's not going to surprise me if we have a good turnaround, if we can extract some of this talent, and focus it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so many new bodies out there too. I mean, there's a lot of potential for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, let's transition just a little bit away. We started talking a little bit about potential there, and we talked a little bit about expectations. Coach, I mean, you got to see the team. As you kind of go into this is something I've been doing with the fan forum too. What are your expectations for year one? What are the things that you really want to see come out of this offseason? And it can be a win total if you want to say that, or it can just be, what are the culture? What are the things that you want to see be accomplished? If we're sitting here having the same conversation in January next year.
Well, I'd like to be somewhere warm in January. That would be nice. I mean, I've been a dad for 4 years and I haven't been to a bowl game, so that would be awesome. But the great thing about these coaches, they've got experience, or Coach Rhule at least does. I mean, they've got experience at multiple schools, different levels. He's been a head coach a long time, and a lot of the previous staffs, Mike Riley had a ton of experience, but Bill Callahan didn't have a ton of head coaching experience. Bo Pelini didn't have a ton of head coaching experience. Frost only had a couple of years of head coaching experience. And sometimes when you haven't been the head guy for a long time, things like game management are tough sometimes. Culture building is tough sometimes. And I'm not just talking about the last staff, but, some of the previous ones all the way back down the road. Matt Rhule's been there. He's done that. He's turned around programs. I don't think he's going to make too many mistakes in game, or when when we're down by 5 points with the ball with a minute and a half to go or whatever. He's not going to get shaken. He's going to know how to handle those situations. So I'm excited about those little things going our way.
Yeah.
I'm excited about, because you say, well, geez, we were so close. But when you're just so close and you're on the wrong end so many consecutive times, there's obviously something wrong at some level. And like we mentioned earlier, it's a lot of those little things that start from day one when they get here. A lot of those little things, like whether it's how you interact with the kids in the locker room, or how little ways that you practice, or little things in the strength and conditioning program, or whatever. But all those little things add up to whether or not you win those close games. I mean, and so I'm excited to see, and my expectation is that these guys are going to build that culture that they want. They're going to get those little things taken care of. I mean, Coach Rhule came unglued in the scrimmage the other day because, we had a scrimmage in the red zone, a fumble in the red zone during the scrimmage, and a penalty in the red zone. He wasn't happy about that. He wasn't going to allow that stuff to happen. So that's what I want to see. I want to see us be able to come through in those big moments and just find a way to get it done. It's just unbelievable to me how our kids never quit. They never quit. We only got blown out once in the last 4 years that I can remember, and that was Oklahoma last year. We never quit, but yet at the same time, so many of those games we lost close ones. These guys, I'm hoping we'll be able to switch that just because of their experience they've had as coaches.
I love what you said there about Rhule in the red zone and fumbling and that driving him crazy and having a penalty. Really fumbling and turnovers anywhere drives a coach crazy. It takes me back to 95 and Frazier and Behringer having a battle going into their senior year. Who's going to be the starter? And, the story goes that Behringer had one extra turnover. I think it was an extra interception in one scrimmage. And Osborne, he graded everything. And that was the difference. We aren't going to turn the ball over. And that's how important it was. One play like that could be the difference between you playing or not at that position. And, we've had enough games now. And this is where I say it's not the little things, right? It's not turning the ball over isn't a little thing, or that penalty, back-to-back penalties to start a game or whatever. Those aren't little things. They're real, fundamental things. And I love seeing the coach. I love hearing you say that he really hit on that as being important there. So I love that. I want to get out of here talking about one other thing, and that is Coach Solich is going to be back for the spring game. We mentioned, our first coaches clinic, we were there during Solich. You've been all the way back to the Solich era as well. What does that mean to you, Coach, to see Frank coming back for the first time since 2003 and to see him, what are you expecting to see on spring game as he's being welcomed back in Memorial Stadium?
I would have to assume it's going to be a roaring ovation. I would have to expect that. I mean, I know I'll be yelling. I was very excited. And I think the previous staff wanted to get him in too, but it was, maybe it's just because he's out of coaching now that he's coming back and doing that. But I think it's awesome. I think it's great that these guys, and we mentioned their feelings towards Coach Osborne, but them reaching out to Coach Solich too. You know, one thing that drove me nuts about Bill Callahan when he took the job is he wanted to just, hey, we got to change the culture. We got to, you know, this is my team. We're doing it this way. That didn't work. You know, these guys realize, yeah, they're going to do it their way, but they still want to reach out to the past, because how can you not at this place? I mean, how can you not have some reverence for the past and want to reach out for the past? And so I'm super excited that he's coming in, and I think you're going to see the stadium really, really be excited as well. And I think you'll get a great ovation. And I hope that Coach Solich is, and I do not know Coach Solich personally, but I really would have to assume that it's going to be a special day for him. And I hope it is, because he's a pretty important guy in the history of Nebraska football. I mean, and so it's really a neat thing to get him back.
Yeah, and the history of Nebraska football, it's a storied and tradition-rich history. And one of my favorite stories is hearing Osborne when he became AD, right after Peterson left, and they had just built that new North Stadium, brand new. I remember one of the coaches' clinics right afterwards. It looked beautiful, but it was white walls. There was nothing on them. And Osborne, he was asked a couple of weeks into being the AD, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, the walls are pretty bare. We're gonna get some of those championship trophies up. We're gonna get some of those Hall of Fame, pictures up that the players were taking photos in front of. We're gonna start to show some of that history. And we've had the blessing on this show of having Tyler Kai, the associate AD at Nebraska, on, and he helped with all the fundraising and everything. And he's given us a lot of the insight on what's going on with the new North facility. I think that's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see that open up. I think it's going to be amazing for players, for recruits, and for us fans. There's going to be areas for us to go into and see some of that history. So I think that's going to be an awesome thing to see open.
Well, it sounds like the players might even get in there this summer. I don't think the coaches are moving in until into August or the beginning of September, but it's getting close. I mean, we didn't get to go through it and tour it or anything, but I was right up close to it, and boy, it's coming along. It's almost there. So I'm like you. I remember when they built the new North Stadium, and I remember going through there and looking around and thinking, how can anything possibly ever be better than this? And then not too long later, all of a sudden, everybody catches up with us. I'm like, wow. Yeah. And so through Garrett's recruiting, we went through some of these other big stadiums, and I'm really was blown away. So I think this one is going to be special from some of the things I'm seeing that's going in there. So I'm really excited to see it. I'm really happy that Garrett gets to be a part of it for a couple of years too. And so I really am excited to take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I've heard is that the football team, they're going to move football related things into it first before they get all the other things done. But the football team should be in there by the fall. As you mentioned, coaching staff might trickle in a little later, then eventually the training table and some of the study areas and things that will open as it gets done. But it should be an amazing facility.
Yeah.